All right, hey, you guys, my name is Mike Rocket Blackstone. Welcome back to Taking Flight. Tonight I'm going to talk about the November 8th, 2024 report on the Catalina Airport disaster that happened on the 8th of October 2024 with a Beechcraft Baron that took off at night from the Catalina Airport in an effort to go back to Santa Monica Airport. Juan Brown Blanco Lirio did a very nice report on that just a couple days ago, and he did a great job. So I'm not going to get into all of the details of what he talked about here, but this is an interesting thing that had happened, and I've got some experience there. So I thought maybe you guys might get some value out of my experience with Catalina Airport and what can go wrong there. First and foremost, my heart goes out to these guys. I mean, these are fellow aviators that had a breakdown at Catalina Airport, and then this was a rescue mission, from what I understand, with the Baron flying over from Santa Monica Airport to pick these guys up and then fly them back to Santa Monica. The timing of it was not good, and there were plenty of things that started to snowball, and in my mind, this was one of those days that when things start to go wrong, you start to get your heightened sense of awareness up of, wow, how many things got to go wrong here before we have a problem we can't get out of. So with that, here's some of the risk of Catalina. When you go to Catalina, there is essentially, there's no amenities there. There's no services there. So you have no maintenance, you have no fuel, you have really no services at all there except a place to land, and I think you just chalk your plane with rocks. I mean, there's no tie downs, there's nothing. So you fly out there, and you're on your own. So if you need any amenities or any things at all, you should bring it. If you need oil, bring it. Always fly there with enough fuel to return and a bunch more, so that you have fuel, and if someone else needed fuel, you can give them some of yours possibly. So you tend to go out there in the anticipation that you're going on a camp trip and something could go wrong, right? So here's what I imagine. Without a lot of experience out there for these guys, they didn't recognize the dangers that were beginning to pile up on them. The fact that the first airplane went out and got stuck was probably one of their first clues. The Baron that went out there, interestingly enough, as Juan mentioned in his video, was that they had brought a battery charger with them. Now, if those of you who have been in this business or been around aviation a long enough time to know, the batteries today aren't as good as possibly they used to be, whether it's the pink battery or the Concorde. Which of these batteries does a better job at lasting and holding charges, and why does it seem like they don't have as much juice as they used to? I don't know, but I've been down this road, and they ain't cheap. So we're talking about an $800+ battery for something like a Baron, a 24-volt lead acid sealed battery. Could be $800, $900, right? So, or more. So they're expensive. And when you go to start your 540 engine with your 24-volt battery, and the plane's been sitting overnight, and the oil's thick and the battery is struggling, and now it's getting to the cooler temperatures at night, these batteries aren't very capable of handling cold temperatures. And then you go to start your Baron and get one running, and it barely got going. Now your battery's kind of depleted. You go to start your second engine and chug, 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 and it doesn't start. And then you try 2 more times, and you finally get this thing going. If that battery was low when it left Santa Monica and they barely got it running after either a quick charge there, which seems like they might have had a problem there with it, that's why they brought the charger, and then get to Catalina and you shut down, and you look for your guys, you go pay the landing fee, $35, whatever it is, up at the tower. They had made arrangements to land there after official close, but supposedly to be gone by the time that the sunset occurred. This was a time crunch. So you get into Catalina, and then you find that You find your guys, you go to start the airplane, and you can't. It's stuck. You go to hit the blade, chug, chug, not enough to start the first engine. Not good, right? Try again, click, 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 dead. So now they've got to somehow charge this battery. This was one of those times when you say, all right, we messed up. We brought a plane over with a battery that had a known problem. Now we got a problem. So you check your backpack. Do you have your t-shirt, socks, and underwear and toothbrush? Are you ready to spend the night here? Oh, you forgot that. How about jackets? Did you guys bring jackets to warm up? It's probably 60 degrees there at night, all night, every night, and the moisture, it gets damp and cold there at night, and there aren't any amenities there. You're going to be camping underneath the wing, or inside a Baron with 5 men is not going to be that comfortable, if at all. This is turning into a problem, right? So how do you get from the airport to a hotel? Usually there's a hotel near your airports, right? Except at Catalina, no hotel right there. So the normal transportation between Catalina Airport and Avalon City is a scheduled shuttle bus that you pay. Last time I did it was like $20 each way per person. So these guys are looking at $100 for the van, the scheduled van, to take them down to Avalon, where they would hopefully find a hotel and basically camp down in Avalon for the night while they left their Baron on charger all night with the extension cord that they had, and try this again in the morning. That's what should have most likely happened. But there probably wasn't any transportation, so they would have to call an Uber. So I don't know, an Uber or somebody down in Avalon, you call them, then you start paying this bill. For a couple of $100, they could have had somebody come up from Avalon, 40-minute drive up, 40-minute drive back, down to Avalon, spend a few $100s on a hotel room or two, maybe $500, and they would have been able to try this again the next day the safe way. But they didn't. They talked themselves into thinking that this wasn't a big deal, that we could charge up the battery, we'll get it going, and we'll take off, and it'll be a nice VFR flight back. The clouds are below the height of the runway, so what could go wrong? Well, in my experience of being in Catalina, every time you think about nothing could go wrong, something does, and the clouds roll in from the southwest side of the airport. So the clouds tend to bunch up on the southwest side of the runway, at the far end, at the departure end of the runway. The clouds go there, and then they begin to come up the mountain ridge, and then they pour over the runway, and it ends up with a nice blanket of fog at the far end. So there's been several times I've been out there that have opted to go to the other runway and take off with a slight tailwind pointing away from the clouds, so you don't go IFR at the far end of the runway. Of course, the planes I was in out there at the time in the Waco, it's not really an IFR ready machine at the far end, and I wasn't ready to do that. So I've taken off to the northeast with a slight tailwind in my tail dragger. You ask me how much fun that is to do, not recommended. Okay, it's varsity at best. Again, one of those times when you have to do a shit hot maneuver to make up for piss poor head work. Don't do that. It's a bad idea. So here at Catalina, there's that danger looming out there for you, and there's no lights on this runway. Okay, so if you guys have ever had a situation where you show up at an airport and the lights are off, we know that we could key up the mic multiple times, 3 times, 5 times, 7 times, to raise and lower the intensity of the lights at the airport, usually on a timer, and everything's great. I tell you a short story about a time that I was bringing a Citabria back from the New Jersey area where I bought this thing, and I'm flying it down southwest in the place I was going to after multiple legs, getting there naturally after dark because the flight planning that I did wasn't that great, and I ended up coming in after dark. You'd think that would be no problem in a plane that has nav lights, cockpit lights. It's night certified, right? It's got landing lights. You're good to go to fly at night. except if when you get to the airport on min gas and you get there and the lights are not coming on the frequency. So you're checking the frequency, make sure you got the right frequency, you make a phone call. Hey, why don't the lights work here? And now you realize you don't have enough fuel to go anywhere else. Oh no, right? So you want to talk about a scary evening is making essentially a fuel emergency landing into an airport that the lights are off at, and hope that you can see enough when you get down there. So you make one low pass, you realize the runway's long enough, you realize the light is sufficient enough to see the concrete. And I landed my tail dragger airplane out there on a runway in the middle of nowhere with no lights on it, with just landing light only. I don't recommend that. That's another nice little learning experience to avoid for your future flights to keep you safe. But here you are at Catalina. In your Baron, just barely got enough juice on this thing from the battery to get this thing started. You go to start the first one, and it barely gets started, let's say. Chug, chug. Oh, God, we got the left engine running, thank God. All right, left engine's running. Run the RPMs up a little bit on the left. Try to get some higher generator alternator power to this thing to bring the voltmeter up, the ammeter. Okay, it's taking a charge. Good, right? Sort of, maybe. And barely get the right engine started. So now you got both engines running. You got your ammeter going. This thing appears to be charging. I don't know if you've ever flown a plane with a very, very low battery. There's a chance that your battery, which may have been enough to get the engine started, is not enough to power your avionics. That's a nice little surprise. Radio's not going to work that great. And what do you think would happen when you go to raise the gear with a battery that is very, very low? On a twin engine airplane, it probably takes quite a bit of amperage to bring that gear up. So here's this looming problem for these guys that are taxiing out. Engines are running. It's after dark. Now they're going to make a night takeoff on a runway with no lights on purpose. Could have spent the night. Chose not to. Figure this is going to go okay. And they take off on the southwesterly runway 22 at Catalina. Throttles come wide open. Start rolling. Lift this thing into the air. Reach for the gear handle. And possibly drain the battery the rest of the way through, and it does not bring the gear up. Now what? Now they're trying to get going out to the southwest. It is pitch black out there, like Juan mentioned in his. Inky black sky is the word. If you've ever been out over the ocean in the middle of the night on a moonless night, it's so dark you can't see anything. You can't see the sky. You can't see the water. You can't see anything. If their gauges at all were not illuminated, and he was talking about carrying them, you're in for a hairball evening when you put the flashlight in your mouth to illuminate the airspeed, the attitude, and the altimeter. You're holding the flashlight in your teeth while you're making an illegal takeoff on a dark runway into a dark sky with an airplane that you know has an electrical problem. Wow, if that isn't something that you say, man, we should, because there's three things. I was kind of thinking threes. If there's three things that are going wrong tonight, all I need is one more problem, and we might not be able to handle the fourth item. So this is already the three at least now. So in my mind, what had happened to these guys is if they went to raise the gear and they didn't come up, or got it unsafe and they didn't come up all the way, or they came part way, the distraction of the gear not coming up might have been enough to get them to just be distracted, and the pilot flying stopped flying mentally and just let this thing descend into the terrain down out there off the end of the runway. The gear also could have popped the breaker. I've had that happen on a Beech 18. You go to bring the gear up on this thing, and if the load is too high for whatever reason, or there's not enough voltage in this thing, maybe it goes a little ways and boop, pops the breaker, gear motor stops, and they're hanging straight down. The light is off. You probably don't have 3 green anymore now either. They might have come off of the little down and lock to partially up, but they're not up, and they're not down either, and they're making a lot of drag, and now you're not sure. that whole situation of not knowing what you got in the middle of a sketchy takeoff roll at best is not good. And here's another thing to think about. As you take off, when you drive your car, I don't know if you've ever done this before on a dark road. This is things that dumb kids do. But as you're doing this, you're motoring down the road in your car. If you back in the old days when you could turn your headlights off, you could take your headlight switch and turn it off for a second and see how dark it gets when you turn your lights off. If that battery failed or went dead on the takeoff roll and the headlight went out, they wouldn't be able to see the concrete at all, which would be terrifying. Obviously, they got this thing into the air. But what happens with your landing lights when you rotate? V1, rotate. You bring that nose up. Now your landing lights point into the sky. You can't see anything anymore now. So what you did have for any kind of reference for where the ground is or level or anything, you're instantly IFR, right? So your nose is coming up, lights coming away from the concrete, and you can't see anything with the ground anymore. How's that feeling? Gears down, it ain't climbing. And now the speed's rolling back. If the airspeed is not able to sustain, they just get a stall on takeoff. That would have been a horrendous way to have this end. But they managed to keep the speed up by descending. How they knew where the terrain, you just don't. You're descending down into a valley out there at the far end of 22 down this valley, and there's terrain on both sides. If you can't see that, you can't avoid it. And there's really no lights down there. There's no towns or anything. So there's a few speckles of houses. Descending down that valley after takeoff because you could not sustain the climb because the gear's still down is terrifying. And the fact that maybe the gauges went out. If they lost all battery power completely, and the lights just dimmed down where you could not see the airspeed, the altitude, or the attitude indicator post takeoff there into the darkness, into the terrain. I got this rule about flying GA light airplanes at night. I'll do night, but I won't do night with terrain if there's weather. Right, so you can do two. Say, you know what? I might do a little bit of weather, but I don't want to do weather at night. I'll do one, but I'm not going to do two. I can do a little terrain, but I don't want to do terrain in night, and I certainly am not going to do terrain, night, and IFR in a light airplane at all. When you've got a choice, do better flight planning. Take a safer route. When you're flying across the Pacific, I'm thinking about when you're flying across the mountain ranges. Take the lower route. Is there any benefit? And here, I've done this for many years. I used to think, take off from LA and I want to fly to Dallas. Why don't I just go LA, Dallas and go direct? Because it takes you over some really high terrain in a small airplane. Does it really add much time to go to El Paso and then Dallas? Go ahead and run the numbers on that and fly that route and tell me how many minutes difference that you save by going direct. There really isn't much difference. And remember that the Earth is a globe. For all you flat earthers out there, the Earth is actually a globe. And direct from A to B is not like on a map. You can't just draw a line from A to B. You have to compensate for the curvature of the Earth. So swooping down and doing an arc any direction as you're flying from A to B actually is just about the same time. So always take the safer route. Always fly it at a safer altitude. Always check your altimeter and make sure that you're taking off with a known field elevation so that your altimeter is correct when you take off. Take off with your battery charged, and know where you're going and have a plan of what you're gonna do when something goes wrong, because you're in aviation. If it can go wrong, it most likely will go wrong, and usually at the worst possible time. So unfortunately, this is what happened to Catalina. In my mind, I kind of see that, and they finished their report. Juan Brown did a great job. It looks like that is what they had happen to them. And when you fly out to Catalina, be safe out there, you guys. Certainly don't take any unnecessary risks. There's no benefit in that. A nice night in Avalon would have been a much more fun and adventurous. It'd have been fun and adventurous too. Cost you $400. So what did that? About $100 each to make that happen. I'm sure they would have rather done that. So with that, Keep safe out there, guys. If you like what you're seeing here, go ahead and comment. If I messed up anything, please put it in the comments below. I got no problem with that. I'm always trying to make it better. And I hope to see you guys up in the sky one day and in the next episode. Stay safe.